there's a new decision from the International Court of Justice. The top UN court says Israel's presence in occupied Palestinian territories is illegal and should end. To tell us what this entails, we have Simon from Florida who has been following this and tells us this is a very big deal. What does this mean, Simon? And what am I looking at here? It's the International Court of Justice from The Hague, 19th of July, 2024. The International Court of Justice today has given its advisory opinion in respect to the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, where they say these settlements are illegal and should be removed from the occupied Palestinian territory. What is different about this decision than some of the other decisions made recently by the ICJ?
So, Harrison, this is an absolutely momentous, earth-shattering decision. Thank you ever so much for being so nimble enough to squeeze it into your broadcast.
Of course.
So people understand how timely this is. The judge, Chief Justice of the panel, which includes an American judge, just finished reading this 1 hour and 2 minutes ago. There's 7 bullet points in the press release that provide a summary, and there's an 83-page judgment, which he spent an hour and a half reading out the most salient points of. People can find this on X, formerly known as Twitter, by going to @CIJ_ICJ. They'll find a short 5-page summary of the ruling in the form of a press release. And they don't make it easy, but halfway down the first page of the summary on Twitter, which you have to click the link in order to get to read the 5-page press release, they'll find in blue the word advisory opinion. They then click on the hyperlink in blue, advisory opinion. That will take them to the full 83-page judgment. But there are 7 bullet points, which I'll run through very quickly with you, and I mean that. And they are, in the majority opinion of the International Court of Justice, which is not just the UN court, this is the top judicial body in the world. And most countries, particularly Britain and the European Union, provide absolute deference to these rulings. Okay? So essentially, this could prevent Israel from holding any assets in British pounds or euros, just to understand that. Okay? So they say, point number 1, quote, direct quote from the summary of the advisory opinion: the state of Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful. Let me get through these, and you can look at it, ask me any question you want, and I'll answer them in detail, because I've read the full judgment and listened to the whole thing orally, okay? The second point is the state of Israel is under an obligation to bring to an end its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory as rapidly as possible. 3, the state of Israel is under an obligation to cease immediately all new settlement activities and to evacuate all settlers from the occupied Palestinian territory. The state of Israel has the obligation to make reparation for the damage caused to all natural or legal persons concerned in the occupied Palestinian territory. And in the judgment, they explained that goes back to the 5th of June, 1967. That's potentially trillions of dollars that could bankrupt the state of Israel. Okay? All states are under an obligation not to recognize as legal the situation arising from the unlawful presence of the state of Israel. That affects Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the unified capital of Israel and moves the embassy there, and to not render aid like America does every year or assistance in maintaining the situation created by the continued presence of the state of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. And note, it's not occupied territories. The court specifically said that East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip are one legal identity.
Mm.
Okay? International organizations, including the United Nations, are under an obligation not to recognize as legal the situation arising from the unlawful presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. And the United Nations, especially the General Assembly, which requested this legal opinion, and the Security Council should consider the precise modalities, that's the method, and further action required to bring an end as rapidly as possible to the unlawful presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. This is huge.
It sounds huge. Is this the first thing like that? I guess my two questions are: is this as unprecedented as it seems that the ICJ would come out with this, or have they said this type of stuff before? And two, what is the enforcement mechanism for these demands? I mean, what are they going to do to Israel if or other countries if these guidelines aren't followed?
Right. So what this is going to, obviously, the last point says send it to the United Nations General Assembly. They could suspend Israel's membership, and as they did to prosecute people in the case of the dissolution of Yugoslavia, they could set up an ad hoc tribunal, in addition to the actions going on at the International Criminal Court. Okay? Then they could also find that this provides exceptionally strong grounds for financial compensation claims in any country in which Israeli-owned assets are held. So, Central Bank of Europe, the Bank of England, commercial banks, clearing houses for futures, for bonds, gold depositories, anywhere where the State of Israel has either intellectual property or physical assets held within those jurisdictions. Okay?
Wow.
And I think many American courts would give standing to such claims, because they've given claims, you've got to remember, from the grandchildren or great-grandchildren of Jewish people from Europe who had assets seized by the Germans during World War II, even 80 years later. So this is an exact allegory. Now, in the actual judgment, they explained that this relates to the 2004 previous advisory opinion, explaining how Israel, was the occupying power, and as such had legal obligations under the Geneva Convention, particularly the Fourth Geneva Convention, in terms of providing sustenance and education and medical facilities to the civilian population under its control. Okay, like any other occupying country has that obligation. Okay?
I'll tell you what, Sam, we have to go to commercial break here. If you can hang on, I want to go back to you on the other side to finish up our coverage with this. And I also want to get into something you were talking about with Hobbs on Roads to Liberty and myself last Friday, which was the Trump-proofing that's going on in NATO and here in America. I want to get your take on that as well, so stay with us, folks. Welcome back. Final segment of American Journal today. By the way, I will be on vacation next week, so Chase Geiser will be sitting in for me for the first few days, and we'll have some guest hosts in the next. So I hope it all goes well. But this will be my final segment for a little while. I have Simon from Florida on the line. Simon, what else do we need to know about this decision from the ICJ? The AP News says top UN court said Friday Israel's presence in the Palestinian occupied territories is unlawful and called on it to end for settlement and for settlement construction to stop immediately, issuing an unprecedented sweeping condemnation of Israel's rule over the lands it captured 57 years ago. So not just about some of the newly incorporated settlements in the West Bank and elsewhere, but going all the way back to the beginning of Israel 57 years ago, or at least to the 1967 war. What else do we need to know about this before we move on to another topic?
So the reason why this is critical, and to put it in context, is the Israeli Knesset, their equivalent of like the House of Representatives, voted just recently to not recognize the state of Palestine.
Right.
Okay? They've ruled out categorically the two-state solution. That has torn away the fig leaf that American foreign policy has relied upon for over 50 years, that there would be a negotiated settlement that would end up with the creation of two nations, Israel and Palestine.
Mm.
That has been utterly destroyed in a vote of 68-9 with a lot of abstention. Okay? And so this is a huge problem for the United States, because not only do we have this extremely strong ICJ ruling in the last hour, but we've also got that vote that was taken just yesterday that has shredded any kind of pretense that for America to enforce these legal rulings would undermine the negotiations between Palestine and Israel. What Israel did yesterday is just said, negotiations, there's never going to be a state of Palestine. There's nothing to negotiate about. We're not listening to what the UN or America or the European Union tells us. It's never going to happen. Okay? So this justification for all of the vetoes that America has exercised at the United Nations Security Council, saying, well, if we were to do this, this would prejudge the amicable negotiations between the two parties, which is much more likely to end up with a long-term peaceful solution. That excuse has been utterly disintegrated.
Wow.
And now it's just America flat out. We're not defending the rules-based international order.
Right.
International law doesn't count for shit. We're just going to look after our boy in Israel, which obviously everyone has realized for decades. But now it's just bare, stark, flashing in your face like a neon sign in Las Vegas.
Right. And it just shows the hypocrisy and the arbitrariness of how seriously they take the rules-based international order that we have to fight wars over. But when it goes against us, we ignore it and actually say it's wrong. Really incredible. Now,
no comparison. Already, InfoWars, admittedly with my assistance, and I will be getting into this more on weaponizednews.com from 6:30 p.m. tonight, you already have done a 7 times better job than the Associated Press Association, because we have covered all 7 key points of the judgment, and they did one headline.
Well, I know
that just goes to the value of InfoWars.
Well, and the value of our callers, because obviously this broke while we were on air and wouldn't have been able to read into it in the way that you have. So thank you for bringing us that information as always, Simon. And something else that you brought up again last Friday when I was on Roads to Liberty with yourself, and you were talking about the way that NATO is being Trump-proofed. And this is something that's happening here in America as well. We know the intelligence community has said that they are going to be withholding debriefings from President Trump before he's president, and they've hinted they're going to continue it even when he's president because they think he's too dangerous for certain information, which is a usurpation of the voters' rights to choose who is in charge in our government, total treason and violation of our Constitution. But it's Trump-proofing certain activities that they're involved in. They are announcing that they're going to not give information to the president, so he can't stop them from doing what their plans are. We know that they are Trump-proofing Ukraine aid and basically setting Ukraine aid in perpetuity for at least the next 10 years. We'll be giving this much. So even if Trump gets in and tries to stop the war, it's already set in stone and there's nothing he can do. And they're actually passing laws to prevent Trump from being able to reverse their decisions. But this is happening at the international level as well. Tell us how NATO is being Trump-proofed right now. So
this is particularly important because it relates back to an American Supreme Court decision in 1979 that relates to Jimmy Carter's exercise of presidential authority, which was upheld to unilaterally cancel, in that case, the Mutual Defense Agreement from 1954 between Taiwan and the United States. Just so people are clear, we don't have a defense obligation anymore, okay?
Right.
And now the Senate brought that action to say, if we've approved a treaty, then surely it should be the Senate to cancel a treaty, not just the president saying that doesn't count anymore, okay? Now, Trump relied upon that to cancel America's funding of the World Health Organization.
Right.
But he gave the 6 month notice that was required, but did it so freaking late that the 6 months didn't kick in before Biden took office, and he was able to revoke the cancellation.
Right,
Okay?
but that's the type of presidential authority and presidential exercise of power that that they're now putting in place rules and laws and things to stop him from doing.
And now, Biden administration has agreed not one set of future agreements with Ukraine. They did four at the NATO summit, which many other countries joined in with. And just before that, they did the bilateral security agreement. And many of those agreements look forward all the way into the 2030s. Now, none of them have been ratified by the U.S. Senate, so they're not legally superior to the U.S. Constitution because they are ratified treaties, right? And the bilateral security agreement, which appears to oblige America to defend Ukraine for at least 10 years, far beyond the expiry of the next presidency, does have a 6 month cancellation clause in it, which obviously Trump should execute on day one of his administration. Get out of that 10-year bilateral security agreement. But this ICJ ruling has huge implications for the foreign policy that Trump has espoused as, quote, King of Israel, a title which he thoroughly embraces. And J.D. Vance is super pro-Zionist, and it creates enormous problems for the ongoing aid, not just the stuff in relation to Gaza, but the annual aid budget, much of which is reallocated and used for some of these settlement activities. Blinken is talking about this right now at the Aspen Security Conference. He obviously hasn't had a chance to read this 83-page judgment because he's literally on the stage at the moment. So the info warriors who are listening, you're better informed than the United States Secretary of State, thanks to Harrison Smith and his nimble staff, who literally threw me on at the last second. And you've basically broken this story in more detail than anybody else, even on Twitter. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for doing this. And no, I was getting your messages during the show. And you said it was a big deal, and you did not fail to deliver. This is a very big deal, and we'll see what the outcome of this is. Give us what time you're going on tonight again, one more time, Simon, before we say goodbye.
So that we don't clash with Owen, we'll cover this issue and its huge implications that could literally bankrupt the state of Israel. It could be trillions of dollars with damages going back.
6:30 tonight. Is it weaponized news?
We'll start at 7 p.m. This Israel issue from 7 p.m. Eastern, just after Owen finishes his show. So people will be able to switch over to weaponizednews.com or Weaponized News on X or Weaponized News on Rumble.
Weaponized News. So tune in tonight to see Simon break it down in thorough detail. I'm sorry I have to go, Simon. We're coming to the end of the show, but thank you so much, as always, for keeping us informed of these very important but very lightly covered international situations, folks.